Hi, I'm Jimmy Aluria here at 3A Automotive and Diesel Repair. We get a lot of questions about suspension noises, ride comfort, and different handling of different vehicles. So today I'm going to answer some of the most common questions to help you understand a little bit more what's going on with your car and how to extend the life of your vehicle and the tires. What are common signs of suspension problems? Some of the most common signs of suspension problems are typically in the way that the vehicle drives. So if you've got a problem where you're driving the car and it wants to pull one way or pull another way, that's a sign that you have something going on with the suspension or the tires. Another sign a lot of times is noises. You're going to hear some banging, some rattling, typically when you're going over bumps or you're making turns. Those are the most common suspension problems we run into. Noises or things pulling and it's not driving properly. Why does my car bounce excessively? One of the reasons why your car will bounce excessively is when the suspension, meaning the shocks, are going bad. The shocks, and another name for them is called the struts, when those are going bad, you're going to get a lot more bouncing. So when you're going over bumps, a big bump, it's going to continue to bounce for a long time. Or even when you're on the freeway and you hit something like a pothole, the car is not stable. It bounces a little bit and it's a little bit harder to control. And that's because the suspension's job, the shocks, what they call the struts, are there to keep the tire on the road. And if that car is bouncing too much, it means that it's not stabilizing the car fast enough, and that's a sign that the shocks are going bad. What causes clunking or knocking noises going over bumps? If you ever hear a clunking noise or a knocking noise when you're going over bumps in your vehicle, it's a sign that there's something worn out or loose in the suspension. Typically the suspension in between, it's made out of metal parts, and in between those metal parts you'll have rubber components and you'll have something that's lubricating the grease. And if we have something that has lost the rubber, or there's no lubricant, the grease in between those parts, that's where you're going to hear that metal on metal clunking or knocking. So it's a good sign to get something checked out right away because we have something going on with that metal or with that lubrication in the suspension system. Why does my ride feel rough or unstable? Typically when your ride feels rough or it's unstable, we have something going on with the suspension. If it's rough, let's say you're going over bumps and it doesn't stabilize the car, that could be a sign that the shocks need to be looked at or maybe replaced. Another situation that could make it feel that it gets unstable is that we've got something loose in the suspension. If you're driving down the road and it feels like you're kind of wandering all over the road and it's a little bit unstable, that's a sign that the tires aren't staying straight on the road because there's something loose in the steering or the suspension system. Can suspension issues affect braking or steering? Suspension issues can definitely affect braking and steering. The way that suspension affects braking is that when you're going over a bump, the whole idea of the suspension is it needs to stabilize those tires on the ground. If those tires are bouncing because of the bump or the pothole, then you're going to have a really hard time braking because the tire is bouncing and it's not able to stop the car. Now it can also have effect on the steering as well, because the suspension is there to stabilize the car, it's to keep it level and handle whatever turn you're doing so that it's not rolling too much one way or the other. And that is definitely going to affect the steering. So if you're taking tight turns around a corner and you have bad steering components or you have some bad suspension components, it's going to feel like you're out of control and that car may not, go straight again right away. You're going to have to compensate with the steering. So it'll definitely affect both braking and steering. What causes uneven tire wear from suspension issues? Well, uneven tire wear is typically caused from suspension issues because the tires are not rolling straight. The whole idea with steering components and suspension components is to help the tires stay flat on the ground and stay straight. And if you've got something going on with the suspension where the tires are turned in or turned out, or they're like what we call pigeon-toed or duck-toed, all of that is going to cause the tires to wear unevenly. So if there's any situation where there's a loose component in the suspension, you're going to get uneven tire wear, and you're going to have to replace those tires before they have to be replaced because of that suspension issue. How do worn down shocks or struts affect handling? One of the ways that shocks and struts affect handling of a vehicle is that the shocks and struts are there to stabilize the vehicle when it goes over bumps, and even more importantly, it's to push the tire down to the road. So when you go over a bump, that shock's job is to get that tire on the road so that it's not bouncing. Because when the tire's on the road, that's when you have the most control handling the vehicle. So if your shocks and struts are bad and you go over a bump or anything rough in the road, that tire is bouncing and you're going to have a lot harder time controlling the vehicle. Is it dangerous to drive with suspension problems? I believe it is very dangerous to drive with suspension problems. The suspension's job is to help keep the tires on the road and to stabilize the vehicle. So preventative maintenance and suspension issues is usually there's lots of warning time before you have to deal with it. And if you're getting it checked out by a professional mechanic, they're going to tell you when you need to replace certain things. But if you wait and put that off and you have suspension parts that actually break, now you're running into very dangerous situations for you as the driver and anybody around you, because the suspension is what allows you to control that vehicle in any situation. And if that suspension's broken, you have no control over that vehicle. How do suspension issues impact comfort and control? Well, a good suspension is going to give you maximum control of the vehicle, but it's also going to give you the most comfort. When suspension problems are arising, you're going to start hearing noises, or the car is not going to be easy to control. Maybe it's going to be bouncing a lot when you go over bumps. So it's definitely something that affects the comfort of your driving and making the car drive the way it should and giving you the control that you need to properly control the vehicle. But it's also something where it may not be very comfortable. Very worst case scenarios, you're going to feel the road a lot more when your suspension's not working properly. Whereas if it's working properly the way it should, you may not even feel the road because the car drives so nice over the bumps and anything in the road. What happens if suspension repairs are delayed? If suspension repairs are delayed, typically what's going to end up happening is, number one, you're not going to have as much control of the vehicle. The suspension's there to help you keep the tires on the road and the steering and everything along with that so that you can control in any situation of the vehicle. But the other thing is that most of the time when people put off suspension issues, they're just going to wear out tires faster. And tires are expensive. I mean, tires can be upwards of $200 to $300 a piece, and we've got a suspension issue that's prematurely wearing out those tires. So if you wait on suspension issues, number one, it's going to be unsafe to drive over time, and number two, you're going to wear out those tires a lot faster than they should. What does a suspension inspection include? Well, a suspension inspection will typically start off with a technician driving the vehicle a little bit. What they want to do is they want to listen to the suspension as it goes over bumps. They want to listen and feel how it goes around turns. That would be the first stop, is to actually drive the vehicle and feel the vehicle to see if it's properly functioning. The next step would be to actually put it on a lift the car up off of the ground, and then shake down all of the components, checking the steering, checking the shocks and the struts, checking all the components in the suspension to make sure that there's nothing loose and make sure there's no noises or anything like that. We're also going to check to make sure that all of the rubber that's there to make sure that everything's nice and tight is tight and there's nothing breaking loose. And if it's a lubricatable system, that there's plenty of grease in that system to make sure that it's not noisy and it's properly being lubricated so it lasts a long time. Another part of this suspension inspection is going to be checking the tire wear, because one of the signs of a suspension issue is you're not getting even tire wear. So if we see anything about tires wearing on the outside, wearing on the inside, or the tires are wearing where they're kind of choppy, that's a sign that there could be something going on with the suspension that needs to be addressed. How can suspension repairs improve ride quality? Almost always when we do suspension repairs, the customer is so happy because it's one of the things that you can definitely feel the difference. It is going to improve the ride quality back to the way that the car is supposed to drive. So you're going to feel it when you're going over bumps, you're going to feel it when you're going around turns, you're going to feel it on the highway. You get an oil change or maybe some other type of services on a vehicle, the car feels the same. But definitely when you get a suspension repair, it's going to sound better, it's going to feel better, it's going to drive better. I hope this video helped answer some of your questions about suspension noises and other similar issues. If you'd like to schedule a suspension inspection, just give us a call here at 3A Automotive at 602-997-7978, or you can just stop by. We'll take a look at it, go for a drive with you, and address your concern. We're here to make sure your vehicles remain reliable, safe, and valuable over the long haul.